Welcome to the Real Estate Women's Podcast. Thanks for pulling up a chair to our roundtable discussion. Here, we'll teach you how you can create a stream of passive income through multifamily investing, and we'll help you to shift your mindset so you can start living the life you really want to be living by design today.
Hello, welcome to the Passive Investing Podcast. My name is Colleen.
I'm Tamara.
And I'm Crystal, and we are the Real Estate Women. So today's episode, we are going to be chatting about value add deals. The word value add, you can kind of hear thrown around a lot, and we're kind of going to break that down a little bit. So if something is a true value add deal, generally what that means is you can kind of have a big renovation. It's going to be needed to really get that turnkey and ready to go. So today, that's why we brought Mike on here, who has a ton of knowledge and experience in this field, to kind of help us chat about the risks and rewards of purchasing something like a value add versus something that's kind of more turnkey and ready to go, but could potentially come with a much higher price tag off the bat. So thank you so much for being here today, Mike. We really appreciate you.
Appreciate for having me. Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for being here. I'd like to introduce you. Mike Mannino, he is a partner with Reciprocity Capital Group that buys multifamily properties. Mike's areas of expertise are keeping things running smoothly with a focus on operations, organization, and time management. Mike also runs a successful single-family fix and flip business that turns over 20 plus houses a year, with owning more than over $13 million in residential real estate, with an experience in wholesaling, hard money lending, commercial real estate, with heavy lifts and value adds. Mike owns over 100 apartments in value of excess of $10 million of assets under management. And he's an author of an Amazon best-selling book called The Digital Real Estate Agent.
Thank you very much.
It makes a lot of sense for you to be here today with the area that you're focused on. And, Mike, everyone seems like, they want to do a fix and flip. They want to invest in value add deals. And, traditionally, of course, it means that, the bigger the risk, the better the profit, the gain. We'd like to educate our listeners about like what that means, and since you have hands-on experience, where would you like to start in talking about that? I mean, my mind goes to like how big is too big?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. That's a very good question, and I would say it depends on your own risk, right? Because if you're worth $1 billion, right, a $10 million property is not a huge risk, right? So I always recommend for people to start, honestly, if you want to get into like value add projects, I like to start off with the single family houses, in the $100,000 range, right? Because you can only dig yourself like so much of a hole in a single family house versus if you are buying a $10 million property, it's a huge value add. You've never done that before. You never hired a contractor. You could be digging yourself a very big hole that you can't crawl yourself out of. So I always recommend just start off where you can like get in where you can fit in.
So, Mike, do you find that there's still a lot of those $100,000 single homes available right now? Good deals? Because when we look at things, it's more of, what would have been $100,000 10 years ago, they want $300,000-$400,000 for now. And then you don't always have that meat left on the bone.
Yeah, good question. So it depends where you're at, right? So my fix and flip business is up in Michigan, Metro Detroit. We don't buy in the city of Detroit, but all the cities that touch around it. And we spend a lot of money on marketing. We spend over $100,000 a year looking for discounted real estate. I have 3 people on my team and my 2 companies who look all day and submit offers on discounted real estate. To answer your question, can you buy a house in today's economy for $100,000? Just 2 months ago, I bought a house for $30,000, 1,700 square foot house.
Wow.
I had fire damage with the house. It has a pool that needs to be removed, right? That's $15,000 right there. But when we're done with the project, the neighbor just sold for 300,000 unrenovated. We're looking at 350, 360,000. We have to put about 150, $170,000. So we'll be into it for 200 and it's worth 360,000. So are those deals out there? Yes. Does it come across everyone's desk every day? And are these listed on Zillow? No. You have to spend a lot of time, money, and energy looking for these value add projects.
That makes sense. It's definitely a numbers game, right? The more that you're looking at with the size of the team that you have, looking at that, your eyes collectively are getting on way more than the average person. So you're finding the needle in the haystack a lot more often. So yeah, that totally makes sense in that field, in that aspect. How about if we were talking like, your larger multifamily value add deals, something that, a passive investor might be looking at, they have, some cash, they're ready to invest passively though. They don't have the time for that hands-on, but they're looking at two deals on their hands. Sometimes you're obviously, they're getting a lot of things in their email inboxes, some that say value add, some that's turnkey. When it comes to those two situations, we obviously have some different risks versus rewards, right, for those value add deals. But they also promise the higher returns. And if you were to recommend for a passive investor looking at that deal, that value add deal, would there be any like red flags that you think, okay, this is kind of too big of a renovation to be realistic? Or what are kind of those things that you would recommend for that average passive investor to look at when they're looking at that big renovation value add deal?
Very good question. And I know you said in my bio, I'm a best time selling author for one of my books. And actually I have one coming out August 7th. Hopefully my second Amazon best-selling book called The Infinite Money Glitch. And why I bring that up is because I talk about that inside my book, is you got the horse and you got the jockey when it comes to a deal. The jockey is the operator, the person you are investing in, right? The person who is going to be doing the day-to-day operations. Do they have their construction experience? Do they have the renovations experience? Have they flipped 90 plus homes and done all these? Or are they someone with a normal job? They're trying to get into real estate. They've never hired a contractor before, and now they want to take on this project. Your risk factor goes up dramatically, right? And then you got what we call the horse is the property, right? Is it located in a good area? Things, if you're a passive investor, to look at is the things that you can't change, right? You can't change the location. You can't change the crime rate. You can't change the population and the demographics. So the first thing I do when I look at a deal is I type in the city and population on Google. First thing I do. And Google always has a graph, and you want to look for a graph that's increasing, not inverted. So for a fun experiment, type in Detroit, Michigan population. You'll see in 1990, there's over 1 million people, and today there's 660,000 people in 30 years. So and I'm from Metro Detroit. I have never bought a piece of real estate there, and I do not plan to because of that. You are fighting against supply and demand, right? In basic economics. I barely graduated high school, but I remember that, thank God. And then, look up Nashville, Tennessee. Look up and then type in the word population after that. You'll just see things just growing, skyrocketing, right? So as a passive investor, you want to first look at the operator. Do they have the experience to do all this? And then two, look at the property, right? Because I know there's some cities where it might look amazing. Oh, it's cheap, right? Like Flint, Detroit, Memphis, Tennessee. There's a couple of the cities where it's really, really cheap, but there's a reason why it's cheap, right? And a lot of Louisiana and things like that. So those are the things as a passive investor you want to look for at the property and the operator.
That makes sense. So that makes things like, the actual size of the renovation, they're important, but it's really not the biggest aspect, right? So that's where a lot of people get caught up in those buzzwords, the value adds, all that type of stuff. Have you ever met a value add deal that proved to be not worth it, that you thought may have been when it comes to your larger properties, or in your experience at least, has most of the value add deals turned out to be a great situation for you?
Very good question. So, very good question. So there's deals that I have done and it's taken a lot of work, and I was like, I'm actually like in one right now. where it's taken up so much work for this 19 unit that we're completely gutting it, 130 new windows and roofs, and turning these studios into 2-bedroom units, because they're 740 square foot studios. We can actually convert these into 2-bedroom units, like where it's going to be a huge value add, taking the rents from they're $450 a month to $1,100 or $1,200 a month in rents. So it's huge, but it's a huge undertaking. I mean, it's going to be a $300,000 renovation. It takes up a lot of my time.
Yeah.
Versus I bought a property in March that was actually already renovated, a 44 unit in Kentucky. The owner owned it. He renovated, I think, 40 of the 44 units, and he just kept the rents low so that people wouldn't move out. So then all I have to do is just bring the rents up to market. Our renovation budget for 44 units is only 200 grand. We just did the parking lot, some exterior work, and we're going to hopefully make $1 million on that. And that's a way easier to make $1 million just increasing rents and trimming trees in a parking lot versus the other value add of like ripping it all apart and putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. So I thankfully haven't gotten into a project where it didn't make sense, but there's definitely deals where it's like, this one takes like a lot of my time and effort. I would love to just have these layup deals.
Yeah, I mean that definitely makes sense, and that just comes down to proper underwriting, right? It's really evaluating it and seeing. And as far as the passive investor's point, how much, like when you're in that field, the passive investing side, you share a lot of that info with those that invest with you to make sure they're aware of all of that. I would assume.
Yeah, we let people know, especially when there's these huge heavy lifts, that like this one, you're not going to get distributions for a year and a half, on this property that we're completely ripping apart. It's just, all the money's going back into the property, right? But the upside of that is when we go to refinance this in 2 years, you're going to get all your capital back, and then you stay in the deal for all the upsides. You basically have like infinite returns. But for 2 years, you're not going to see anything. Versus if it was a deal that, hey, it's already renovated and it's great, you'll get returns tomorrow, but they're going to be a lot smaller, and you might not get that, cash out refinance or that sale for 5-10 years down the road. So those are the kind of things, like a value add, there's more risks to that, but you can mitigate that by looking at the operators. But there's also more upside versus a deal that's already, renovated and operating, and you'll get some returns.
So it really sounds like each deal is kind of, independent, and it really is based on what the investor is wanting. If they are looking to make money consistently, or they're willing to wait and hold off and have a large return later and then still have some little returns after that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing too. Like, there's other, things you can invest in for if you want like that, that passive, like you want the cash flow, like, right. So we have investors who want that. And like we have our fix and flip business, like, hey, we'll pay you every single month. You get like whatever percent return, you get that every single month. And have people, that's the retirement money, right? But then they don't get the upside in the equity and the, infinite returns. So it's just like, yeah, people are in different places in life. Like if you're near retirement age, you might not want the big, huge risks that, you might want something that's, hey, I already have a few $1 million. I just need something with a good, consistent return that's predictable. And so, yeah, each project's different. Each person who invests is, a different position in life.
Nice. And how is it that you determine what value add deal would be worth your time and efforts investment? Is it literally is there like for a value add deal, I need to make sure all of our investors are making at least XYZ% at the end? Or is it something that, or in your experience, do a lot of other syndicators kind of not do that? And I asked the question for just so our listeners can kind of have those little red flags that maybe they can look for when they have that beautiful OM passing their desk and they see all these buzzwords. What in your experience is kind of some of the little things that they could look out for that, or kind of maybe look into more often?
Yeah.
Like,
that's a very good question. I have to be paid for my time, and my time is very expensive. So a lot of my deals, like, and I'm like very open with that, right? like if you want to hire me, because that's basically what you're doing if you're investing in a deal that I have, to go in, find this deal, renovate this thing, and take it from A to Z for you. Like I know a lot of syndicators might do a 70-30 split where they give 70% of the deal away to the investors and they keep 30% of the deal for themselves and they're operating the deal. We don't do that. We actually flip it the other way. Since we're finding these deals at 50% of value, and we're doing all the work, I have to be compensated for that, right? So you want to make sure that everyone's values are aligned, though. If you do see something that's too good to be true, it might be. If you're seeing something where someone's newer, they haven't done these heavy lifts, and they're only getting a few percent of the deal, and you think they're going to go renovate 100 units for you and manage contractors and hire contractors and do all this work, you got to think again. It might look like a good deal on paper, but once rubber meets the pavement, it might not work. So, and then you asked another good question about what to look for if something is too good to be true as a passive investor. I know we talked about like underwriting, looking at the operator and looking at where the location is, and then also looking at like what they're saying the renovation budget is, right?
Right.
If they're saying it's going to be $100,000 and we're going to renovate 100 units, you're like, well, that's only $1,000 per unit. That's like not even paint. Like nowadays, it costs me like. Sometimes I'm like, what the heck? It costs me like $1.50, $2 a square foot just to paint, a unit, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that's something to look out for. And I saw a lot of that where I think a lot of deals got in trouble over the last few years is they were overly exaggerating how much the rental increase rents could be every single year. They saw maybe a 10%, 15% rent increase for a very short period of time during COVID and all this inflation. But today things have came to a halt. We're even asking less rents than what we did for on some of our properties 2 years ago, right? Yeah. Even offering credits to have people move in, right? But and if you're just projecting 15% every year, the rent's going to go up. That's a huge red flag. And then so the renovation budget, and then also what they believe that the rent increases will be for the future.
That was actually going to be my next question about the underwriting, about the rental increase, and that if there's things in there, the red flags that we're not trying to focus on the red flags. It's just to educate people and what they're looking for, and just so. Like, so if someone was looking at a deal for the first time, passively, what do you think is the best way for them to look at like the rental meter?
Good question. Yeah. So we were I'm like preparing for a presentation tonight. And so I love like the Carolinas. So in the Carolinas, like South Carolina is the fastest growing state in the country by percentage. It grew last year by 1.72% population, which is the most out of any state percent growth, because it's 5.3 million people here, and it grew by 1.72% in 1 year, right? And I was looking at, I always Google what the Section 8 market is for that county. So I looked at a property that we own. I looked at the county. The 2023 rents were for a 2-bedroom were $8.95 a month. 2024 rents are $9.95 a month. It's a 15% increase in 1 year. That is a lot. I don't project that. I say on mine, especially like in the Carolinas, just 3% rent growth per year, very conservative. But that's where it's also beneficial to buy in a growing states, right? Because you're not going to get a 15% rent bump in maybe a lot of these Midwest states, right? Yeah. So that's like another benefit too, to look for investing in places where they're growing, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And back kind of mirroring on that, when you, as a past investor, kind of looking at all those numbers, and I know Mike mentioned that 3% rent growth, that's super great conservative number and what you'd love to see. What are your thoughts about how every once in a while it seems we're seeing things like people forgetting to increase the expenses? Because obviously we have inflation in taxes, insurance. That has been huge killers, I know, for a lot of things. Yeah. And What's your thoughts on that aspect? Because without that in there, really calculating for those expenses going up, just I know in Florida, in Mass, a couple places that we're invested in, the insurance really has done a number on things doubling out of nowhere. So
Yeah, insurance, that's something you can't, because in our model, we have 2% increases every single year for the expenses, right? But, when you're in Florida and your insurance, my parents live there and they're actually buying a house where I'm at right today. They're leaving Florida because of that reason. They've been through 3 hurricanes in 2 years, and their home and flood insurance and car insurance has tripled. My dad's car insurance is $450 a month for his car, for one car. I pay $285 a month for 2 cars, right? I mean, it's a huge difference. So those are the things that you can't really plan for, right? Insurance is going to triple. You can't really put that in your underwriting model. So that's why too, I believe in buying very good conservative deals. Like that's why we buy things at 40, 50, 60 cents on the dollar, so that if those things do happen, it's like, it's a bummer, but it's not going to ruin the whole entire deal, right? And it's funny that you said, I'm going through and actually updating for this 19 unit I'm renovating right now. I have this pricing sheet for every single doorknob I buy, down to a doorknob, 350 lines of Home Depot. And I updated it 6 months ago. I'm updating it today, and 75% of the prices have changed in 6 months. And they have not gone down. None of them have gone down. They've only gone up, right? In cabinets, I was looking at, we were paying $135 a cabinet. Now we're at $330 a cabinet, before and post COVID. I mean, so those are things you do have to be aware of. And that's why I say for the renovations, like where some people say it might be $5,000 for new floors, doors, kitchen, paint, and cabinets.
Yeah.
Was in 2017 and 18, not today. Now you're double that. It's $10,000 for that model. So
So
on that top, what type of contingency amount, like reserve, what overage, like do you typically put into your deals?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think, like, I don't have like a specific like reserve amount. We always do, like, let's say this one project we're actually renovating. We originally thought it was going to be $225,000, but now we're able to turn these into 2 bedrooms, and it's increased the budget probably closer to $300,000. And I miscounted how many windows there were, and windows have gone up tremendously in value as well. I had 130 windows to replace, so you can imagine what that bill was. But a lot of people say to have like a 10%, contingency, and I would say depending on the size of the renovation, right? If it is a paint, flooring, doors, trim, something like that. But if you're adding if you're replacing roofs and windows, adding bedrooms and things like that, I would probably have a 20, 30% contingency on that. And make sure you really do understand your numbers and get, contractors to look at it, and really have as many people around you to double check those numbers. Because like the worst place to be in is like you're in the middle of rehab and you run out of money. So.
Yeah. And that's the scariest thing. I know when you come into the really big renovations, when you're knocking down walls, right? In my opinion, that adds a whole nother level of risk when you hear that, because you just don't know what's behind that wall. What if you knock down that one wall? Well, there's a big problem, and all these other walls and walls go down, and then you have this domino effect. So I think when it comes to risk versus reward and that type of stuff, once you get into that knocking down walls, like you said, the value can really be there, especially for your particular unit property that you're talking. When you're adding a whole extra bedroom, that dramatically increases the value through the rent. But those that are investing passively really need to pay attention and make sure that they can tolerate that risk. And like you said, vet the jockey, because if you have someone riding that does not know what they're doing, there could be a huge, scary problem. That definitely makes sense. Anytime walls go down, it's a whole nother level, in my opinion. Like, you never know what's going to be on that wall.
It's like those are great deals, but trust me, I love the other property I bought earlier this year where I didn't have to do anything, just increase, like not nothing, but we just some exterior stuff. It's a way less. We're not moving walls and things like that. Just give me 100 of those and I'll be happy. But
yes, sign me up. Sign me up.
Yes.
So in your opinion, like in this economy and the way things are right now, do you prefer the like minor cosmetic updates to raise the rents versus the heavy lift? Do you have a preference?
I always prefer the easier, but if the money is there, and I would say, like, I bought that house for $30,000 this year, and it needs
Yeah.
a lot of work, right? It might
Mhm.
take 9 months, but we could potentially make $150,000 on it, so that's like worth it.
Yeah.
But if I paid $100,000 for the property, we're putting 150 into it. I'm gonna be into it for 250, and I sell for 330. And I'm like, now is that worth 9 months of time and effort and capital? So maybe it wouldn't, right? So if
Yeah.
we're doing those really, really big, heavy lifted ones, I want to make sure, like this wood we paid, 45 cents on the dollar for. So that one, it made sense for it. But if I was paying closer to, the retail price, no. And I would say where we're at in the economy, I actually hope that I think every investor is going to hate me. I hope interest rates don't go up for a few more years, or don't go down for a few more years, because I'm finding more deals that actually do make sense than the last four. The last 4 years have been so tough for us as investors to find actually deals that actually make sense, where you put the time, money, and energy into this project, and then you actually have like equity and a payoff at the end. And now we're seeing a lot more of that. So I would say, good question, Colleen. Like, maybe now you don't need these huge rehabs. If you can find these where they're not as, physically distressed, but maybe the seller's financially distressed and there's some value add in that way, then that just makes life way easier than the route I took. I feel like I take the hardest route in life. I have the job that no one wants to do, deal with contractors all day and problems, but that's how I get paid. So.
Yeah, it's really all about just juggling risk and reward, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's how much risk am I willing to take for how much reward, and is it worth it?
Yeah, that's it.
But you have a smile on your face, so you say you do have the hardest part of it.
Yeah, after getting,
Either I think you're cut out for it or you're not, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I would say, I brought on a partner to my Michigan flipping company, and he's a very successful man. He managed 50 people in a very high, stress environment. And he even comes to me, he's like, Mike, I don't know how you do this. Like, this is crazy. Like like you said, you do it with a smile on your teeth, but I don't know. I feel like after you get kicked in the teeth for 10 years, you're just used to it. It's numb, right? I actually heard this quote too, like from Alex Hormozy. He's like, if you've never driven in traffic before, and then you're driving to work and it takes an hour to get there, and normally it takes 30 minutes, like, oh, like, what the heck? But then after you do that for a few months, like, oh, this is just how life is, and it's not as stressful. It's not as, it doesn't hurt as bad. You're just like, this is just what to expect. So I just have thick skin. I'm just used to problems going wrong. It was actually a funny, quick little story. In that 19 unit we're rehabbing, we had a freeze come across the Carolinas in January. I went to look at the property, and I was literally watching the pipes freeze before my eyes, watching them freeze. And I called the contractor over. He's like, Mike, this is a problem. I was like, yeah, it's not good. I'm gonna go get the heater. And he's like freaking out more than I wasn't freaking out at all. I'm like, I say I'm dead inside. I'm just like, it is what it is. It's gonna be a couple $1,000s, and there's gonna be water, and we'll just have to fix it. It is what it is. And he's like, Mike, this is a problem. This, that, the other thing. I'm like, Nick, calm down. It's all right. It's gonna be a couple $1,000. Get the heaters. It is what it is. We'll fix it, right? And what I do love about this industry, though, too, almost everything can be fixed with money. Versus if I was a doctor and I had a patient on the operating table and someone's dying in front of me, that is, it would be very hard for me to sleep at night. A couple $1,000 pipe burst, I would take that every single day of the year versus being like a doctor with a patient on the table. So I would also to just like reframe like what it really is. Thankfully, with real estate, you throw enough money at it, you can pretty much fix any problem.
That's so true. And it just, the first thing that brings to mind when you're talking, even that pipe freezing quote, one of my favorite quotes is, life it's 10% of what happens to you and 90% of the attitude you take to it. So either way, the moment that you're in right now, it's happening. You can either be miserable about it, or you can put a smile on and you can solve the problem. Because at the end of the day, you're going to cry about it and have to solve the problem in the end. So you may as well smile about it and solve the problem off the bat. And that's what I think is such an important. I try to tell my 5-year-old that. She doesn't quite learn. She doesn't quite get it yet. but I tried. So
And two, like what I loved as well is, like this renovation, it's a pain in the butt, trust me. But and I tell Chris, I'm like, 10 years from now, I'm gonna be like, oh, like I'm so thankful I actually went through that and I did all that work. And it's crazy if you look, because in 10 years you're gonna forget all those problems that you went through, and you're gonna be thankful that you did go through it. I am thankful for what 20-year-old Mike went through, and 40-year-old Mike better appreciate what 30-year-old Mike is going through right now, right? And it's cool because actually I wrote this in the book, but like the long term value of things, right? And in 1970, did you know the average rent in America was $252 a month,
Wow.
right? So imagine back then you had $100 problem and there was so much money, it was half of your month's rent. And now that same unit rents for $1,850 a month. That same unit's 800% increase, right? So I just think very long term. And I'm like, you know what? I'm glad I'm doing all these renovations now, as people might think they're expensive today. In 10, 20 years from now, just like before COVID, I was like, oh my gosh, it was expensive. Now I'm like, oh God, I wish I could have those prices. And same like doing the roofs and everything. And 20 years from now, I'd be like, thank God I did those roofs. That was like triple the price, right? So I do think long term.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I resonate with the paint thing too. I feel like paint is completely out of control. Like the prices for painting is absolutely mind blowing. Like a unit turn used to be, okay, slap some new paint on there, no biggie. Now it's like, oh my God, we're slapping paint on there. What's happening?
I know, it's an assessment.
Hey, no new carpet, clean that carpet.
I know.
It's crazy. It's literally crazy. But yeah, I love that. I love the thought of the long term, do this now because, what's the value going to be later? And you're going to have to reiterate the name of your book. I'm definitely interested in getting it.
Yeah, so it's called The Infinite Money Glitch, and it's about buying these value adds and then refinancing them, and then keeping get your money back, and then keeping the cash flow, and you're getting infinite returns. That's why it's called The Infinite Money Glitch, because you're getting in 2-3 years infinite returns on money you no longer have in the deal. You have your money back in your bank account, and you can redeploy it in another property. So yeah, August 7th it comes out. It's gonna be on Amazon. Doing everything in my power to make it a bestseller. Again, it's been 8 years. So I'm a little rusty, but I think I can do it. So yeah, you can get it on Amazon probably when this airs.
Yes.
So, yeah, Mike, while you're at it, if our listeners wanted to learn more about you, how could they reach out or find out about what you do? Where would they go?
Yeah. So I have a Facebook community called Real Estate Wealth Builders. So if you go to our website, rewbuilders.com, Rew Builders, you can go in there. I got free resources. You want to learn how to buy, fix, and flip houses? I got a 30-minute video how I made $55,000 flipping a house. I'll show you A to Z how I did it. Access to our free Facebook group. We have over 1,500 members in there. We just did a cool Key West event in January of this year. We had 35 investors come to Key West, and we were doing live presentations. And then there's a book a call with me. If you want to, learn how to buy, fix, and flip houses like I do, then you can click a button and work with Mike, and you can chat with me about that.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited. You can definitely count on me helping you achieve your bestseller goal. I'll definitely be getting that book. Awesome. Well, thank you so much overall. Like, I'm super excited about the book. Thank you so much for all of the value that you've added today to our listeners, all of, the tips and tricks and all the pointers on what different things to look at on when it comes to these large value add deals and the insights. It's definitely helpful for those of our listeners that are kind of really in the process of evaluating to see what type of deals make sense for them. So thank you so much. We really appreciate and we really appreciate you guys, all of our listeners out there. So thank you so much for joining us at the Roundtable. If you want to learn more about us, the Real Estate Woman, you can check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and of course our YouTube. And then our website is therealestatewomen.com. So thank you, Mike. Again, we really appreciate you and all your info and insight. And thank you, listeners. We'll all talk to y'all soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
The information contained in this podcast is for educational purposes only. We are not licensed professionals and do not give investment advice, tax advice, or other professional advice. Please consult a licensed professional before making any financial decisions. The information contained in this podcast is for educational purposes only. We are not licensed professionals and do not give investment advice, tax advice, or other professional advice. Please consult a licensed professional before making any financial decisions.